I'll never forget the look on Julia's face when I handed her my husband's suitcases right in front of her stunned husband. That single moment of pure shock. Her perfectly mascara-lined eyes widening, her manicured hand flying up to cover her mouth. It was worth every second of the pain I'd endured. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Rachel Carter, 39 years old, a financial consultant, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I was one half of a solid 14-year marriage. My husband, Thomas, and I moved to Briarwood Lane 2 years ago, a quiet suburban street in the outskirts of Denver, lined with leafy trees and spaced-out homes that gave off the illusion of privacy. The kind of place where neighbors wave at each other while taking out the trash but have no clue what's happening inside. Julia and Kevin Anderson lived directly across from us. They were the picture-perfect couple. She was always impeccably dressed, not a brunette hair out of place. He worked in commercial development, armed with that polished charisma that sealed multi-million-dollar deals. They welcomed us to the neighborhood with a bottle of Pinot Noir and a box of homemade cookies that I later discovered Julia had picked up from a boutique bakery downtown. That should have been my first clue about her authenticity. "You caught me at just the right time," I said to Thomas that unforgettable Thursday morning, my voice hollow as I stood in our bedroom doorway. The sheets were still messy from where I'd been sleeping alone. He froze, one hand still pulling on a sock, like a deer caught in headlights. "What are you talking about?" he asked, but his eyes, those eyes I'd trusted for 14 years, refused to meet mine. In my hand, I held his phone. He'd left it on the kitchen counter while showering, and when it buzzed non-stop with incoming texts, I did something I had never done before. I looked. And what I saw shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. "You really should be more careful with your passcode," I said quietly, scrolling through months of messages between my husband and Julia Anderson. Explicit. Plans for their meetups. Inside jokes about sneaking around while Kevin was away on business trips and I was working late. "Rachel, I can explain," he started, but I cut him off. "Explain what exactly?" "How you've been sleeping with our neighbor for the past 8 months, how you told her our marriage was falling apart, while still whispering, 'I love you' to me every night." "Please, Thomas, go ahead and explain." The air in the room felt thick, impossible to breathe. Outside, through the bedroom window, I could see Julia watering the hanging plants on her front porch, completely unaware that the facade she so carefully maintained was crumbling. "It's not what you think," Thomas said, using that soft, soothing voice he always relied on whenever he was trying to keep me from unraveling. I used to find it comforting. Now it made my skin crawl. "Really?" "Because I think you've been with our neighbor whenever I'm not around." The vulgarity felt strange on my tongue, but it was necessary. "I think you've been lying to my face for months while planning secret meetups with a woman who waves to me every morning." Something shifted in me that morning. The initial shock had given way to a strange, eerie calm. I felt like I was watching myself from the outside, like a spectator to my own life. My world had split in two. Before I picked up that phone, and after. The version of me standing there wasn't the woman who decorated birthday cakes or folded his shirts with lavender-scented care. She was gone. What remained was someone colder, stripped of illusions. I was going to end it. He said, his voice cracking. It didn't mean anything. I laughed then. A harsh, unexpected sound. "That's worse, Thomas. That means you risk everything we built for something meaningless." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "Don't." I watched him grasp for words that could undo what had already been done. "There weren't any." "Does Kevin know?" I asked. Thomas paled. "Of course not, Rachel, please. Let's just talk about this. Just us. We can work through it." I stared at the stranger in front of me. The man who held my hand through my grandmother's funeral, who once drove through a blizzard to pick me up when my flight got canceled, who apparently could live a double life without a shred of remorse. Until caught. "You know what's fascinating?" I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I kept thinking something was off these past few months. The way you'd flinch when your phone buzzed. How you suddenly had opinions about things you never cared about. Like that new coffee place Julia posted about. I noticed, Thomas. I saw the pieces. But I kept trying to fit them into the wrong puzzle. I even started therapy. I thought it was me, that I was being paranoid or too demanding. I swallowed hard. I blamed myself for the distance between us. Outside, Julia had finished watering her plants and went back into the house, the one my husband had apparently visited far too often. "I'm going to work," I said finally, "and when I get home, I expect you to be gone." "Rachel, this is my house too," he protested, finding some semblance of defiance. I smiled, but there was no warmth. "You're right, it is. So let me make this simple. You have two choices. Leave for now while we figure this out, or I call Kevin Anderson right now and tear your little arrangement apart." The color drained from his face. "You wouldn't?" "Try me," I said, even surprised at my own resolve. "You've clearly underestimated me for months. Don't make that mistake again." Clearly underestimated me for months. Don't make that mistake again. As I walked out of the room heading to work as if it were any normal day, something crystallized inside me. This wouldn't end with Thomas simply moving out. That would be too easy, too clean. No, this betrayal, this humiliation right under my nose, deserved something far more fitting. There was a kind of grim clarity in the rage now pulsing beneath the surface. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was focused on making sure they never forgot what they did, and that the illusion of safety and secrecy they'd built around their affair would come crashing down, piece by piece. I wasn't just going to end my marriage. I was going to expose their affair in a way neither of them would ever forget. That day at work passed in a blur. I sat through meetings, answered emails, and smiled at colleagues while my mind raced through the last 8 months, recalibrating every memory through this new, awful lens. The night Thomas said he needed to work late and came home smelling faintly of a perfume I didn't own. The weekend I visited my cousin, and he claimed he had a guy's camping trip that, strangely, produced no fish and no photos. The times Julia would make oddly specific comments about things in my life. Like that time she mentioned the exact color I'd painted our guest bathroom, even though she'd never stepped foot inside our house. Or how she referenced the particular wine Thomas and I had opened on our last anniversary, a bottle I thought only he and I knew about. Looking back now, the breadcrumbs had been scattered everywhere. I just hadn't wanted to see the trail. Thomas must have told her. All the signs had been there, waving like red flags in a hurricane. But I trusted him so deeply that I'd explained each one away. When I got home that evening, Thomas was sitting at the kitchen table, his face pale. "I canceled my dinner meeting," he said, like that somehow proved commitment. "We need to talk about this." I set my purse down carefully. "Is that what you told Julia, that you had to cancel your plans because your wife found out?" He flinched. "I haven't spoken to her." "Liar," I said calmly, pulling out my phone. I had installed a call monitoring app during my lunch break, something I never thought I'd do, but desperate times and all that. "You called her at 2:17 this afternoon. You talked for 6 minutes and 23 seconds. The shock on his face was nearly satisfying. "How did you? Does it matter?" I interrupted. "What matters is you're still lying to me. Even now." I sat down across from him. "I have one question, and I want the truth. Why her? Of all people, why our neighbor?" Thomas's eyes fixed on the table. "It wasn't planned. It just happened." "Things don't just happen, Thomas. You made choices every single time." "She was there," he said softly. "When you were working late, when you were stressed about your certification review. She was just there. The casual cruelty of those words hit me like a physical blow. I had been working late to build a career that supported us. All the stress of my promotion had been partly because I wanted to contribute more to our future. "So this is my fault?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Because I was building a career? While you were, feeling neglected?" "That's not what I meant," he backpedaled. "I'm trying to explain, not excuse." I stood up abruptly. "Pack your things. I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here tonight, Rachel, please. 14 years, don't throw that away." His voice broke. "I made a terrible mistake. I'll do anything to fix this." For a split second, I faltered. 14 years was a long time. We'd built a life together. We'd talked about children, though it had never happened. The image of us growing old on this street, laughing about the little things, flashed before me. It had felt real, solid. And now, it all seemed like a well-rehearsed play I hadn't realized I was in alone. We had history, intertwined families, joint bank accounts. Untangling all of that would be excruciating. But then I remembered the messages I'd read. The casual way they discussed their meetups. The laughing emojis Julia had sent when Thomas told her I was working late again. My chest tightened. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was emotional. They'd built a language of jokes and secrets on the ashes of my trust. The ease with which she laughed at my absence, the smugness between their lines, it was unforgivable. "Did you know," I said slowly, "that I turned down a promotion in Portland last year? Because you said you couldn't bear to leave this house. This neighborhood." The realization hit as I spoke. Was that because of her? Did you manipulate my career to stay close to your mistress? His silence was answer enough. "Get out," I whispered. When he didn't move, I felt something snap inside me. "Get out," I screamed, loud enough that I was sure the neighbors could hear, including Julia. He scrambled to his feet, backing away from me like I was dangerous. Perhaps in that moment I was. "I'll get some things," he said quickly. "We'll talk tomorrow, when we're both calmer." I watched him hurry upstairs, and a strange sense of clarity washed over me. In 14 years of marriage, I'd never yelled at him like that. I'd always been the reasonable one, the peacemaker, the one who compromised. Not anymore. While Thomas packed upstairs, I walked to our front window and stared across the street at the Andersons' house. The lights were on, and I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. Was Julia panicking right now? Had Thomas warned her that I knew? My phone buzzed with a text from my sister, Mia. "Everything okay? You seemed off on our call earlier." I hadn't told anyone yet. Saying it out loud would make it real in a way I wasn't ready for. But as I watched Thomas come down the stairs with a hastily packed duffel bag, I knew I needed an ally. "Thomas has been cheating with our neighbor. Can you come over tomorrow?" Her response was immediate. "On my way." Now don't do anything I wouldn't do until I get there. That made me smile. However briefly. The list of things Mia wouldn't do was remarkably short. But that short, snarky text meant the world in that moment. She was coming. I wasn't going to be alone in this. Not in the shock, not in the rage, not in the aftermath. "I'll be at the Hyatt downtown," Thomas said, standing awkwardly by the door. "Please call me tomorrow. We can work through this." I said nothing, just watched as he walked out of our home and drove away. Not to the Hyatt, I was certain. Probably straight to Julia's waiting arms the moment Kevin left on his business trip tomorrow. The thought made my blood boil. They had a system, didn't they? A well-rehearsed routine. One in, one out. Doors closed, lights off. It wasn't just infidelity, it was choreography, and I had been the fool who applauded from the sidelines. That night I barely slept. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, cataloging every lie, every betrayal. By morning, my sadness had hardened into something colder. I knew exactly what I needed to do. When Mia arrived, her fierce hug nearly broke me. "Tell me everything," she demanded. So I did. Every sordid detail, every realization, every plan forming in my mind. "You're sure about this?" she asked when I finished. "It's extreme. So is screwing the neighbor for 8 months, I replied. "They humiliated me in my own home, in my own neighborhood. I'm just returning the favor." Mia studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay. Then let's get to work." What Thomas never understood about me, what he clearly underestimated, was my capacity for strategic thinking. You don't become a financial consultant without knowing how to plan several steps ahead. "First things first," I told Mia as we sat at my kitchen table that morning. "I need to confirm Kevin's schedule." "How are you going to do that without tipping off Julia?" she asked. I smiled thinly. "Because Kevin and I have something in common. We both work too much. He posts his real estate open houses on the community Facebook page every week." Sure enough, a quick check confirmed Kevin had open houses scheduled all day Saturday, tomorrow. Perfect timing. "Now we need to get Thomas's things," I said. Mia raised an eyebrow. "All of them?" "No, just enough to make a statement." We spent the morning selecting items from Thomas's closet. His favorite suits, the expensive watch I'd given him for our 10th anniversary, the monogrammed shirts his mother sent every Christmas. I packed them methodically into our largest suitcases, adding his toiletries, medications, and the framed photo of us from his nightstand. Each item was a memory. Each one twisted now. The suit he wore when I got my promotion. The watch I gave him after his father passed, because I thought he needed something solid, something meaningful. And that photo, God, that photo. We looked so happy in it. But now I couldn't remember if any of that happiness had been real or just a mask overwrought. What about this? Mia held up his passport. I considered it for a moment. Add it. He'll need it when he's living somewhere else. By noon, we had 3 large suitcases packed. I sent Thomas a text. I've packed some essentials for you. You can get the rest later. His reply came quickly. Thank you. Can we talk today? I didn't respond. Instead, I called my lawyer, a shark of a woman who'd handled my financial cases for years. She agreed to meet me that afternoon. You're not wasting any time, Mia observed as I grabbed my keys. Why would I? They didn't. They had stolen time from me. Months of lies wrapped in polite smiles and hollow goodnights. I wouldn't give them one more hour. Not even one. While Mia stayed at the house, I met with my lawyer, Nadine, and laid everything out. She took detailed notes, her expression growing progressively darker. Digital evidence? She asked. I have screenshots of everything, I confirmed, and the phone records showing their calls. Nadine nodded approvingly. Good. What else do you need from me today? A preliminary separation agreement, and I want our accounts frozen. She studied me carefully. You're sure you don't want to attempt counseling first? The courts look more favorably. I'm not interested in what looks favorable. I cut in. I'm interested in what's fair. He betrayed me, in our home, with our neighbor, for 8 months. He manipulated my career decisions to make his affair easier. I want him to feel this. Nadine's stern expression softened slightly. I understand. I'll have the paperwork ready by this evening. Back at home, Mia had been busy. I did some digging, she announced. Julia's been quite the social media butterfly. Look, Mia said, showing me Julia's Instagram account. It was set to private, but Mia had found a way in through a mutual acquaintance. There were dozens of photos from the past year that now took on an entirely different meaning. Julia at a restaurant Thomas had claimed he'd never been to. Julia wearing a bracelet identical to the one Thomas had told me he bought for his mother. Julia on a weekend trip to the coast, during a time Thomas had said he was attending a finance conference. She's been flaunting it, I said, feeling sick. Right under everyone's noses. Each photo was like a punch to the gut, a carefully staged lie that I had unknowingly liked from a distance. How many times had I smiled at her across the street while she smiled back with the smug knowledge of her secret life? Not just that, Mia added grimly. I think they've been using your house. What? She pointed to a photo of Julia holding a wine glass. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable to me, was the unique tile backsplash from my kitchen. The realization hit like a bucket of ice water. They hadn't just been sleeping together. They'd brought their affair into my home while I was gone. Into the place I folded laundry, where I danced barefoot while cooking dinner, where I cried over late-night movies thinking my husband was at work. My sanctuary, defiled. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. Change of plans, I said quietly. We're not just packing his essentials, we're delivering them tomorrow. That night I barely slept again, but this time it wasn't grief keeping me awake. It was anticipation. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. From my bedroom window, I watched Kevin Anderson leave for his open houses, dressed in his real estate finest. An hour later, Thomas texted again. Can we meet for coffee to talk? I'm busy today. I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk. I could almost feel his frustration through the phone. Good. You sure about this? Mia asked as we loaded the suitcases into my car. Absolutely. What Thomas also didn't know was that, while he'd been sneaking around with Julia, I'd been building friendships in the neighborhood, one of which was with Eleanor Hughes, the retired teacher who lived next door to the Andersons. During one of our morning walks, Eleanor had casually mentioned that Julia received frequent male visitors when Kevin was away. Such a shame, Eleanor had said. Kevin seems like such a decent man. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Now I realized Eleanor had been trying to tell me something. It struck me how many people must have noticed something, said nothing, but hinted out of politeness or pity. And I'd missed it all, blind in my trust. I'd texted her that morning. Is Julia home alone today? Her response came quickly. Yes, dear. Kevin left for work. She's been home all morning. Everything all right? Everything's perfect. Would you mind texting me if she leaves? Of course. Mia and I waited until afternoon. No texts from Eleanor meant Julia was still home. No more texts from Thomas either. He'd probably given up for the day. Ready? Mia asked as we pulled up across the street from the Andersons' house. I took a deep breath. Ready. We unloaded the suitcases and rolled them up to the Andersons' front door. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, but my hands were steady. As I rang the doorbell, the wait felt eternal. Then the door swung open. Julia Anderson stood there. Her perfect smile faltered as she took in the sight of me, Mia, and 3 large suitcases on her doorstep. Rachel, she said, confusion written all over her face. Is everything okay? I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. Everything's wonderful, Julia. I brought Thomas's things. Since he's spending so much time here, I figured he might need them. The color drained from Julia's face so fast I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, one hand gripping the doorframe. I tilted my head slightly. No? That's strange, because according to the texts on his phone, you two have been quite close. For months now. I pushed the largest suitcase forward with my foot. His clothes, his toiletries. Oh, and this one, I patted the medium-sized case, has those monogrammed shirts you complimented him on. The ones his mother sends every Christmas. Her eyes widened at that specific detail. Confirmation, if I ever needed it. Rachel, please, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder into the house. This isn't what you think. Oh? What do I think, Julia? That you've been sleeping with my husband in my bed when I'm not home. That you've been smiling in my face at book club, laughing behind my back at block parties. That you... What's going on here? A deep voice cut into my tirade. Kevin Anderson appeared behind his wife, looking between us with growing concern. He was supposed to be at his open houses. The carefully constructed plan in my head began to crumble. Julia's face went from white to green. Kevin, you're home early. Open house got canceled. Sellers had a family emergency. His eyes fell on the suitcases, then back to me. Rachel, what's this about? For a split second I faltered. This wasn't how I'd planned it. Kevin was supposed to be gone, and Julia was supposed to be alone, faced with the evidence of her betrayal. But something in Kevin's confused expression, the same kind of stunned trust I'd worn just days ago, steeled my resolve. Your wife has been having an affair with my husband for the past 8 months, I said clearly. I found out on Thursday. I brought his things here, since this seems to be where he spends most of his time when you're working. The silence that followed was deafening. Kevin's face shifted from confusion to disbelief to something much darker as he processed my words. That's ridiculous, Julia finally gasped. Kevin, she's clearly having some kind of breakdown. Is she? Kevin cut in, his voice dangerously quiet. He turned to me. Do you have proof? I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshots, and handed it to him without a word. Julia lunged for it, but Mia stepped smoothly between them. Don't, my sister warned. Kevin scrolled through the messages, his face hardening with each swipe, the explicit texts, the plans, the inside jokes at both our expenses. When he looked up, his eyes were cold. How long? He asked his wife. Kevin, please, I can explain. How long? He roared, making all of us flinch. Julia began to cry, mascara streaking down her cheeks. It just happened, Kevin. It didn't mean anything. I laughed bitterly. Funny, that's exactly what Thomas said. As if summoned by his name, a car screeched to a halt at the curb. Thomas jumped out, panic painted across his face as he took in the scene on the Andersons' doorstep. Rachel, what are you doing? He called, rushing toward us. Kevin handed me back my phone and turned to face my husband. I think your wife is delivering your belongings to their new home, he said, his voice eerily calm. Since you've been so comfortable in mine. Thomas stopped in his tracks, looking from Kevin to Julia, then to me. Kevin, listen, this isn't... If you say, this isn't what it looks like, I might actually punch you, Kevin interrupted. Because it looks exactly like you've been screwing my wife behind my back and behind Rachel's. He pointed to the suitcases. Take your shit and get off my property. Thomas's face crumpled. Julia, tell him. Tell him what? I asked, finding my voice again. That you've been planning weekend getaways together? That you've been in our bed when I'm not home? That you, my voice caught, that you told her our marriage was falling apart while telling me everything was fine? A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, neighbors pretending to walk their dogs or check the mail, all watching the drama unfold, including Eleanor Hughes, who gave me a small, sad nod of acknowledgement. Everyone is watching, Julia hissed, trying to pull Kevin back inside. We need to talk about this. Privately. No, Kevin said firmly, shaking off her hand. I'm done with privacy and secrets. He turned to me. Did you know about this before Thursday? I shook my head. I had no idea. I found their messages on his phone. Kevin nodded, a look of grim understanding passing between us, fellow members of a club no one wants to join. Thomas, I said, turning to my shell-shocked husband, I've frozen our accounts. I filed separation papers. My lawyer will contact you on Monday. I gestured to the suitcases. You should take these. I assume you'll need somewhere to stay, now that both your beds are unavailable to you. Thomas stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Not really. Not this version of me, one who refused to be the silent, accommodating victim. You can't do this, he said weakly. I already have. Kevin stepped forward, picked up the largest suitcase, and shoved it hard into Thomas's chest. Take your things, and leave. Now. The neighborhood watched in stunned silence as Thomas loaded his suitcases into his car. Julia had retreated inside the house, sobbing audibly. As Thomas drove away, Kevin turned to me. I'm sorry, he said simply. Me too. Coffee sometime? He asked, surprising me. I think we might have a lot to talk about. Despite everything, I found myself nodding. I'd like that. As Mia and I walked back to my car, the weight that had been crushing my chest since Thursday felt lighter. Not gone. The pain would linger for a long time, but transformed into something I could carry. You okay? Mia asked, squeezing my hand. I looked back at the Andersons' house, where Kevin stood alone on the porch, looking just as shell-shocked as I'd felt days earlier. No, I answered honestly, but I think I will be. 6 months passed, seasons changed, wounds began to heal. The divorce was finalized faster than I expected. Thomas didn't fight it, couldn't really with the evidence stacked against him. I kept the house. He kept his guilt. Julia and Kevin Anderson put their house on the market 3 weeks after that day on their doorstep. I heard they separated too, though Kevin stayed in town, while Julia moved back to her parents' place in Minnesota. The neighborhood gossip eventually found new targets. Though Eleanor Hughes still brings me cookies now and then, telling me how proud she is of my moxie. Thomas tried to contact me several times in those first few months, apology texts, emails explaining how he'd found himself through therapy. Once flowers delivered to my office with a card begging for coffee, just to talk. I donated the flowers to a nearby nursing home and never responded to any of his outreach. Some wounds don't need closure. Some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness. What surprised me most was my friendship with Kevin. That offer of coffee turned into weekly walks, then occasional dinners, 2 broken people finding comfort in the one person who truly understood their specific kind of pain. Do you think they were worth it? Kevin asked one evening, as we sat on my back porch, watching fireflies drift through the summer dusk. To each other, I mean. Was the affair worth losing all of this? I considered the question carefully. I don't think it was ever about worth, I finally replied. It was about convenience. Opportunity, selfishness, he nodded slowly. I keep wondering if I missed signs. If I should have known. Me too, I admitted. But I've realized something. Their choices weren't a reflection of what we lacked. They were a reflection of what they lacked. Integrity, courage, honor. Kevin's hand found mine in the deepening darkness, a gesture of understanding, not romance. Not yet. We were both still healing, still learning to trust again. I'm selling real estate in Colorado next month, he said after a comfortable silence. A week-long trip, beautiful mountains, clean air. You should come. I turned to look at him, surprised. As your friend, he added quickly. Separate rooms. I think we both could use some perspective, some distance from this place and its memories. I squeezed his hand gently. I'd like that. Later that night, after Kevin had gone home, I stood in my bedroom, the room I'd once shared with Thomas, and realized I'd gone an entire day without thinking about my ex-husband, without feeling that sharp stab of betrayal, without wondering what I could have done differently. Progress comes in small moments. Healing happens in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. I picked up my phone and texted Mia, I think I'm going to Colorado next month. Her response came immediately. With neighbor guy? Yes, as friends, for now. I smiled at her teasing, then walked to the window that overlooked what used to be the Andersons' house. New owners had moved in last month, a young couple with a toddler and another baby on the way. I'd welcome them with wine and store-bought cookies, making no claim about having baked them myself. The truth, I've learned, is always simpler than lies. I don't know what the future holds. With Kevin, or with my career, or with this house full of complicated memories. But I know this. I survived the worst betrayal I could imagine, and I emerged stronger. Not unscathed, but unbroken. Sometimes when life hands you heartbreak, you don't just survive it. You use it to build something new, something honest, something real. And sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in the moment of exposure, but in the quiet dignity of rebuilding your life without the ones who tried to destroy it. I close the curtains on my old view and turn toward whatever comes next. So the story is over, our wonderful friends. Are you still here at this hour? If you are, then something in this story must have touched your heart in some way. And now together, let's take a breath and look at what we've just been through. This wasn't just a story about betrayal. It was about rediscovering your strength in the ruins. About standing up, not for revenge, but for clarity, for truth, and for dignity. As Rachel said, progress comes in small moments, as this healing happens in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. That line doesn't just live in fiction, it lives in the spaces we all know too well: heartbreak, loss, change. There's a powerful truth here. The betrayal wasn't about what Rachel lacked, it was about what Thomas and Julia lacked. That's a lesson we often forget in our own lives. When someone breaks our trust, we look inward. What did I do wrong? Was I not enough? But more often, their actions reflect their own emptiness, not our worth. If you've ever stood in Rachel's shoes, or maybe you're standing there now, please know this: you are not alone, and you are not broken. The wound is the place where the light enters you, Rumi once said. Sometimes those cracks are exactly where strength begins. So maybe the most important message we can take is this: sometimes the greatest revenge isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's simply choosing peace, choosing yourself, choosing to rebuild a life so full of grace that it leaves no room for those who tried to diminish you. If this story stirred something in you, share it. Let someone else know they're not alone. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and be part of a space that values healing, honesty, and strength. And until next time, remember, you are stronger than the worst thing that ever happened to you.